The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily represent those of any organization, including One Generation Away.
The freedom of a people to choose its leaders is the root of liberty.
Keep alive this experiment in liberty.
Liberty, in case you've forgotten, is the soul's right to breathe.
Government should be very minimal in protecting liberty.
Peace cannot be purchased at the cost of liberty.
The sturdy ground of liberty.
Liberty once lost is lost forever.
Fight for their liberty and for our security.
Guarantees individual liberty.
This great republic, born alone in liberty.
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 Liberty. Liberty.
Just how much do you want liberty?
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner,
a production of LibertyNation.com.
Cutting through the double talk, taking on the topics, going after what the politicians really mean, and making it all clear. For your freedom and your liberty. Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Democrats in disarray. Are things really as bad for them as they look? Could they get any worse? Welcome back into Liberty Nation Radio, a production of LibertyNation.com and heard from coast to coast on the Radio America Network. Can the 4 men and 1 woman left standing in the Democrats' quest to regain the White House overcome the increasingly long odds against them? We'll drill down on the state of that race and on the black vote, a dead cinch 95% lock for most Democrats in presidential elections, but which now appears in play to a degree we have not witnessed in decades. LibertyNation.com socio-political correspondent Jeff Charles joins us to analyze whether Trump is truly gaining support or not. In this segment of the population, Democrats must win overwhelmingly or face another 4 years on the outside looking in. Plus, LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor Scott Cosenza discusses everything from decrypting hard drives to trans athletes in women's sports to more outrage about speed cameras in Talkin' Liberty.
Say what? Say what? Say what? One more time.
We kick things off with our signature segment, Say What, where we roll out a virtual assembly line of wacky, astonishing, damnable, and ultimately revealing things uttered by politicians and the chattering class. Bernie, Buttigieg, Bloomberg, Biden, barely, the killer bees, plus the surging Amy Klobuchar are essentially the only ones left standing in the Democrats' race for the presidency following a New Hampshire primary that left 2 candidates, Biden and Liz Warren, on life support. And a result that hardly settled the issue of just who the Democrats are and how they intend to present their case for unseating President Trump, not through fake Russia collusion or overreach to the max with impeachment over a phone call and likely more investigations and more impeachment. No, but through an actual election, which, despite their 3-year crusade to throw Trump overboard, and much to their misfortune, will include Donald Trump on the ballot. Bernie Sanders has been victorious in the first 2 contests and may well be headed for another win in the Nevada caucuses next Saturday, which makes him the undisputed front-runner at this point, with the clever young Mayor Pete tugging at his coattails. And the Democrat establishment isn't even trying to hide its horror at the prospect of Bernie, the self-proclaimed socialist, heading the ticket in November. Listen to the man who helped engineer an 8-year run for Bill Clinton in the White House, old-timer James Carville, in a state of open panic, starting with the black vote.
The African-American voter is central to the Democratic Party. It's our largest constituency. It's not a bunch of urbanists, running around on Twitter, as you would think if you read the New York Times. I know 10 times more African-Americans than most people I know. And they're looking for somebody that can come in and not just excite them, but talk about things that really matter to them in everyday life. They're not interested in socialism and the revolution and all that foolishness you hear. They're interested in somebody that's going to come to them and articulate a vision as to how they fit into this country. If we go the way of the British Labour Party, if we nominate Jeremy Corbyn, is going to be to end the days. We're going to be the British Labour Party. We're going to be out in some theoretical left-wing la-la land.
Jeremy Corbyn, Bernie Sanders, separated at birth and equally toxic to their party brands. In case you weren't paying attention, Corbyn and his Labour Party were walloped in a landslide for the conservative Boris Johnson back in December, securing the final consummation of Brexit. Now, almost lost in the meltdown of Joe Biden right out of the starting gate, a disastrous fourth-place finish in Iowa, followed by a cataclysmic fifth place and 8% of the vote in New Hampshire, was an almost equally disastrous performance by the woman who reached the top of the polls in the fall and has been collapsing ever since. Elizabeth Warren famously attacked Bernie at a debate by claiming Bernie said a woman couldn't win the election, starting a big feud between the two progressive camps. But incredibly, the fake Indian senator came out after getting crushed in New Hampshire and called for everyone to play nice.
The fight between factions in our party has taken a sharp turn in recent weeks, with ads mocking other candidates and with supporters of some candidates shouting curses at other Democratic candidates. These harsh tactics might work if you are willing to burn down the rest of the party in order to be the last man standing.
Which is exactly what Senator Warren wants to be, the last woman standing, even though she's got no chance and will stay in the race anyway. So let's recap. Now that she got all nasty with Bernie, she wants the nastiness to end. And after she tried to kneecap Bernie by calling him something he clearly is not, a sexist, she wants to stop others from burning down the party. All the while so blissfully unaware of her own breathtaking hypocrisy. So everything that's happened to date has played right into the hands of the stealth billionaire Mike, don't call me Michael Bloomberg. Can you imagine if Donald Trump at 71 said, hey, start calling me Don? Bloomberg skipping all 4 contests in February as he bombards the airwaves with hundreds of millions in ads aimed at the 14 states on Super Tuesday, March 3rd. Bloomberg was hoping for exactly the kind of chaos which has now emerged. But this week, someone unearthed a head-shaking, dehumanizing statement from years ago by the mega billionaire about his signature stop-and-frisk policy, which came under severe fire during his 12 years as mayor.
Put those cops where the crime is, which means in minority neighborhoods. So it's one of the unintended consequences is people say, oh my God, you are arresting kids for marijuana that are all minorities. Yes, that's true. Why? Because we put all the cops in the minority neighborhoods. Yes, that's true. Why we do it? Because that's where all the crime is. And the way you get the guns out of the kids' hands is to throw them against the wall and frisk them.
So let's see where this leaves us. A guy with unlimited money who violated the most basic civil liberties of blacks and Hispanics is running for the nomination of a party defined by social justice warriors and hatred of wealth. Seriously, you couldn't make this stuff up. And he could actually win in this field of mediocrities and dinosaurs and extremists. But as Donald Trump Jr. put so eloquently this week, the former mayor is missing one critical asset.
You know, he's been buying his way through all of these things. The one thing that Mike Bloomberg can't buy is personality. He can't buy heart. He can't buy that connection with real people that Donald Trump has.
But as Don Jr.'s father points out, what's just as bad or even worse is that upon entering the presidential race, Bloomberg immediately apologized for the very policy that was central to his administration for 12 years.
When a man is with stop and frisk his whole life, and then he decides to go Democrat, and he goes to a church, and he's practically crying. It looked like hell. He's practically crying, saying what a horrible thing he did. I think that's so disingenuous. You know what I'm talking about, fellas. That was so of Bloomberg. Look, he's a lightweight. He's a lightweight. You're going to find that out. He's also one of the worst debaters I've ever seen, and his presence is zero.
Again, with the presence, the personality, zero. So, what are Bloomberg's chances, really? Well, we present the views of a guy who holds no water for Trump, to say the least. In fact, he hates Trump personally so much that he doesn't even care that Trump has done so many of the things that he and his fellow Trump-deranged Republicans claim to be in favor of their whole lives. He's Steve Schmidt, virulently never Trump Republican, on MSNBC.
The first thing that Mike Bloomberg has to have happen to move forward in this race is for Joe Biden's argument around electability to completely collapse. And we're there. If you can't beat Mayor Pete, and you can't beat Bernie Sanders, and you can't beat Amy Klobuchar, you lose your standing to claim that, hey, I'm going to beat Donald Trump.
But it gets even worse for the Democrats.
Donald Trump has the largest cash advantage in American political history against every conceivable Democratic opponent in the party, which is inept and bankrupt. And nobody should underestimate the importance of what happened in Iowa last week. It was a disaster of a magnitude that beggars my ability to describe. The Republicans have a light-year distance in the technology gap between their side and the Democratic side.
They have less than 9 months to try and narrow that gap. And a good way to start would be to decide who exactly they are as a party. Liberals, socialists, social justice warriors, woke, mainstream, billionaires, anti-billionaire, what? It seems like a steep uphill climb, but then let us not forget what seemed like an impossible dream for Donald Trump just 4 years ago. That became America's new reality. And a bit later, we'll discuss how the Democrats have missed a golden opportunity to win back the White House by planting themselves in the past or in the resistance. How they have denied November 8th, 2016 in favor of the good old days of November 7th or the open rebellion of November 9th. But first, we'll examine 3 words that have turned from reassurance to fear for the Democrats. The black vote.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Where can you find honest political commentary with sobering analysis, accountability, deconstructing threats to our liberty, and boldly reporting the truth? Subscribe to LibertyNation.com YouTube channel, where facts matter.
We believe that all men are entitled to the blessings of liberty.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Well, we've heard whispers and rumors and speculation about it for a while now, but with the way things are going for the Democrats these days, the living embodiment of the Keystone cops who can't get out of their own way and get steamrolled by this president time after time, it's turned into a major topic of discussion these days, and rightfully so, the black vote. For almost 60 years, the currency, the bread and butter of the Democratic Party, may well now be in play to a degree we haven't seen before in the wake of 3 recent polls with stunning approval numbers among African Americans for President Trump and the descent of the Democrats' presidential field into a trio of candidates who've been unappealing, shall we say, to black voters. Here to talk this through is Liberty Nation's own Jeff Charles. Hello, Jeff.
Hey, Tim. How you doing?
I'm doing well. So I got to ask you a question. When President Trump spent $10 million on a Super Bowl ad, the first one he put up 2, but the first one, the very first one that, 100, 200 million people saw, was about Alice Johnson, a black grandmother that he released from prison after 21 years. He could have put up an ad about immigration or the wall or the economy or jobs or whatever, but he chose this. What did that say to you, if anything?
Yeah, when I first saw that, I mean, and I had already been hearing about how he's going to be going after the black vote, but when I saw that, that solidified it. It shows that that winning over black voters is a top priority for his campaign. And I'll tell you, Tim, it's a long time coming for a Republican president to actively court the black vote. It's awesome to see.
Well, it seems that President Trump has such high support among his base and among Republicans writ large, something like 94%, and such a weak Democratic field that he can afford to spend a lot of time and make a huge push among this totally atypical demographic group. In other words, it seems like he has the luxury of trying to snag a few more points from the black vote.
Yes, he does. He definitely does. And I love that he's doing it. He's doing it even though he doesn't need to do it.
Right.
And I think that, I mean, and I'm sure that there have been people who have maybe tried to talk him out of it, but he's not doing it. He's going after the black vote because I think that even if he didn't have that 95% among Republicans, I think he would still be doing that, because even in 2016, he didn't do what he was doing now, but he at least spoke to the black community to try to earn some votes.
Well, the message this time to the black community writ large is that, last time I said, what have you got to lose? Take a riverboat gamble on me. This time, he says, not only do you not have anything to lose, but look what you've gained from the first 4 years of my administration. Emerson and Gallup and Rasmussen, that's 3 prestigious, credible polls, all put Trump's approval above 30% among black voters. Now, should we expect him to get anything near that number in November? And more importantly, perhaps, Jeff, what percentage would you consider to be the threshold number, the point of no return for the Democratic Party?
I think we have to be realistic about this. I mean, he's not going to get 30% of the black vote. I would put it anywhere between 10 to 15%, because he's going to be doing these campaigns. He's actually talking to black people and not just talking about black people.
Of course, the black vote will hinge not just on Trump, but on who the Democratic candidate is. And it seems Joe Biden was going to be the great white hope of the Democrats to win the black vote, presumably because he was Obama's vice president, because I can't think of any other reason. But with his campaign now, on virtual life support, it seems none of the other candidates still standing have any real appeal to black voters. Black voters were supporting Biden partly because of his tie to Obama. But, I mean, a recent poll came out showing that black voters, 58% don't even identify as liberal. 58% identify as moderate to conservative. Somebody like Sanders or even Buttigieg or Warren get the nomination, I think a lot are going to stay home. Okay, well, I'm sure we're going to have you back to talk more about this in the run-up to the presidential election. For now, thanks for joining us again, Jeff. Appreciate it. All right, thanks for having me. That is Jeff Charles, socio-political correspondent for LibertyNation.com. Quick break, and then we're back to discuss why and how the Democrats have failed to seize a golden opportunity to win back what they lost in 2016.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Far more important than my political future and far more important than yours, the well-being of our country.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
It was palpable, the change that occurred overnight on November 8th, 2016. Not because it was my birthday, it was, but because, of course, you couldn't imagine much more of a change than Barack Obama being replaced by Donald Trump in the White House, or more of a seismic shock to the body politic than this bombastic billionaire securing the highest office in the land against all odds. The morning of the election, the New York Times mirrored most all of the other media outlets in giving Hillary Clinton an 85% likelihood of victory. Trump, 15%. There's no denying that this stunning upset not only changed the country overnight, much like when Ronald Reagan took over from Jimmy Carter, but at least Reagan you could see coming. He'd been governor of the nation's largest state. But like when Reagan was elected, Trump's victory froze the left in place in a state of shock, disbelief, denial, that first of the famous 5 stages of grief, which they have yet to shake. Witness their 3-year religious crusade, and that's what it is, to deny the legitimacy of the 2016 election, the very thing they warned us that Trump would do if he lost. And so, paralyzed by their own denial of the reality of that never-to-be-forgotten November 8th, Democrats have divided into 2 camps. The ones who want to return to the world of November 7th, 2016, and the ones who want to exploit the outrage and resistance unleashed on November 9th, 2016, with a revolutionary manifesto, while Trump, all the while, is living in a November 8th world, a world where the American people have registered their disgust with the ruling class and kicked the bums out in favor of a riverboat gamble on the most unconventional and controversial candidate ever to come down the proverbial pike. Now, what exactly do I mean by a November 7th or November 9th world? Well, think of what happened after 9/11, 19 years ago. Some people immediately adjusted to the September 12th world that emerged from America's dark night of the soul. Others preferred to live with the memories of September 10th and the world that was. A total of 70,000 votes separated Trump from Hillary in the 3 states which famously swung the election: Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. 3 states the Democrats had owned all the way back to the 1980s. A party in control of its faculties could have immediately seen the message from the people who abandoned them, like in the 200 counties, yes, 200, that voted for Obama twice and then for Trump. They could have said, okay, message received. We get it. We paid no attention to you. We abandoned your cause. We took you for granted, but we won't do it again. You're our voters, and we will win you back. They could have done a mea culpa, fallen on their swords, and admitted to understanding the desperation of people so frustrated and angry at the discredited political establishment that they were willing to roll the dice on a total wild card full of sound and fury, which may or may not have signified nothing other than campaign rhetoric. Of course, that's not what happened. Trump has fulfilled or advanced the ball on almost every campaign promise and has delivered dramatic reforms. But the voters had no way to know whether he would or wouldn't when they voted. The guy had never even held political office, and he was running for the highest office in the land, running for leader of the free world. Talk about rolling the dice. That's how thoroughly dissatisfied the voters were. But instead of trying to come clean and win back the people who'd voted for them for years, the Democrats buried their head in the sand, did everything in their power to overturn the will of the voters and discard the results of the election. And we see the wreckage of that in their campaign to try and get rid of Trump the old-fashioned way, through the ballot box. We have the poster child for a return to the world of November 7th, 2016, Joe Biden. His campaign, now on life support, barely clinging to life, waxes nostalgic day after day for the good old days of the Obama administration, when we were at one with the world. He and his fellow swamp dwellers were large and in charge. The globalist vision was advancing. Political correctness went largely unchallenged by those in power, and a stagnant economy was the new norm. The result of Joe Biden's campaign: a 4th place finish in Iowa, 5th place in New Hampshire. The dogs just won't eat the November 7th dog food. Then you've got the November 9th crowd, the ones like Bernie Sanders, so incensed by Trump's victory that they believe the answer to this quintessentially capitalist, racist, misogynist, deplorable president is to go to the opposite extreme as they see it: socialism, revolution, scrapping the economy and starting all over. They want government-run health care, the end of private insurance, open borders, free health care for illegal immigrants, and the big kahuna, the Green New Deal, which was take us back to the dark ages, pre-industrial revolution. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that the people want what they actually voted for on November 8, 2016, or they wouldn't have elected Trump any more than they elected Obama twice. They don't want the world of November 7th, the world gone by, or November 9th, when denial and resistance came to define the Democratic Party. The immortal words of that washed-up boxer turned longshoreman from the classic movie On the Waterfront come immediately to mind when contemplating the fate of the 2020 Democrats. I could have had class. I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody instead of a bum, which is what I am. We'll be back with Talkin' Liberty.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
And now we welcome you into the portion of Liberty Nation Radio, which we entitled Talkin' Liberty. It's when we welcome back in our constitutional lawyer, LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor, and the man we like to call, you want to do it yourself?
Oh, no, I love to hear it,
our
please.
guardian
of
individual liberty. You just stepped on
be
it.
my own hype man,
You just
Tim.
stepped right on my introduction. Okay, stop. One more time.
You invited it.
Okay, one more time. Our guardian of individual liberty. Wow, I had to go deep for that one. Welcome, Scott.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Now, a man who refused to decrypt hard drives is finally free after 4 years in jail. What is it that he refused to do that kept him in the POCO for 4 years?
Well, the important takeaway from this case, Tim, is that for the first time, the federal courts have established a length of time that you can be imprisoned for refusing to implement passwords for law enforcement to gain access to your electronic devices. The person we're talking about is a former Philadelphia police officer, and he was accused and has been accused. His name's Francis Rawls, of possessing and perhaps even manufacturing child pornography. Now, he refused to or implemented incorrect passwords for encrypted hard drives that the police suspect contain evidence of his crimes. And he said, I don't remember the passwords. And they threw him in jail and said, well, we believe you're lying, and you're going to go ahead and unlock those drives, or you're going to stay in jail. And he sued and says, hey, listen, I don't know the passwords. What, I have to spend my life in prison because I can't or won't unlock these. And
would there have been a different penalty if he said, yeah, I know them, and I'm not going to give them to you? Is there a difference?
Well, yes, because then the court can say, we have the legal right for you to implement those passwords so that the drive can be decrypted. So if you refuse to do it, then you're just in defiance of the law, and they can hold you presumably
But they can't prove that
right.
you can't remember.
And by the way,
right.
He could have remembered it at the time they asked him to, and subsequently forgot it. I mean, you can forget a password, right? It's not like, especially one that you don't enter frequently. So the court here, and the reason why we're talking about it, Tim, is there's an important ruling which so far says 18 months right now is the longest time that the federal government can keep you in prison or jail for want of letting them access one of your devices.
All right, Scott, let's move on to a story that has become very present in the news, which is the status of transgender athletes, and now in this case, biological males, as they're described in the headline. Their ability to compete in women's sports. Now, woke people, those people who conform to a radical form of political correctness, think that trying to deny transgenders the right to compete, former males, by the way, not former females, but former males who become female, of course they should be allowed to compete in women's sports, but more and more women are speaking up against it.
That's right, Tim. This case comes out of Connecticut, where a number of women have sued under the Title IX protection of the Civil Rights Act. I think lead among them is Chelsea Mitchell, who is the fastest, quote-unquote, biological girl in Connecticut. And she has lost multiple state championships to a number of trans male athletes. And the complaint from these women is that a mediocre kind of or middling level male athlete can transition to female and then become the best because of the inherent biological advantage, which of course led to the creation of women's sports to begin with,
exactly,
so that they could achieve. And the argument by Ms. Mitchell and her co-plaintiffs is that by allowing anyone who says they identify as female to participate in the competition as a female, then that discriminates illegally against biologically female persons. And it's kind of an interesting situation. Unfortunately, it's a shame that I think the courts are having to resolve all this. It would be better if, there could be an athletic association that would, try to address the issue with some subtlety, and then maybe people would just the marketplace, in other words, I'm saying, could provide, in other words. But that's not what we have, and in this litigious society, the courts are going to have to work this out.
What kind of woman athlete would want or support the idea of transgenders competing in the same lane as them? I mean, what kind of woman would support that other than people who are so overcome by wokeness that they don't dare draw any distinctions between someone who used to be a male and was born as a male, as a biological male, and for whatever reason they changed genders, that person is going to become the equivalent of a female for athletic competition? What kind of women would want to support that?
The complaint itself goes through many of the differences that biological males and females have differently, including their bone density and musculature, the heart and lung size, for instance. There's a reason why no woman can compete at the same level as an elite male in our major sports. And even the outlier ones that maybe can come close, they are outliers. And I mean, if you want to allow women to compete amongst women, it seems like you're going to have some kind of rule in place, or every of the women at the top of their sport will be trans women.
The other question is, what kind of trans person would in good conscience participate in a competitive event against women who come to the starting line with a 30, 40, whatever percent disadvantage simply by nature of their gender?
It's hard to know from the stories, Tim, if these are people who are taking advantage where they shouldn't, or they're simply people who, they happen to love running and they happen to be trans and they want to be able to compete athletically.
And I understand that. I understand that. But fair is fair. How do you, in good conscience, say it's a perfectly level playing field for me, who used to be a male, now I'm a female? I mean, it'd be like me going and competing against my wife in a sport. I mean, that's just not going to happen. She did beat me a couple games in tennis, but not that often.
Right.
Wow. This is a big issue. There's a big issue, but it's an issue for women to settle amongst themselves, really. I mean, because they're going to have to decide if they want to expand. We're all going to have to, but it's mostly a woman's decision. Women are going to have to decide what they want to do here. Okay. New York, you knew this was going to happen. You knew this was going to happen. The camel's nose under the tent was speed cameras. We have the right to ticket you for speeding without a human being having actually witnessed it. So we all accepted that at some level. Now that's part of society. Now the next natural step, Scott, is for New York City to go ahead and confiscate cars over speed cam tickets.
Tim, we have talked many times on this program about the numerous problems regarding automated ticketing, whether it's a speed camera or a red light camera, you name it. There are lots of problems there, and including outright bribery that we have convictions on. I think in Illinois and in Texas both, maybe the Carolinas, there's been a case of these Red Flex and other automated ticketing companies bribing the local people, politicians, in order to get, because that's where their revenue comes from, the ability to suck it from you and I and the rest of everybody out there driving. Well, New York City has now said, if you have a certain number of these tickets, we're going to seize your car. And I can tell you that because of my monitoring of these types of stories through the years, what's going to happen is there's going to be mistakes made. Somebody's going to plate that's going to be misread, or there's a divorce and the husband was supposed to change the plate. And, of course, what's going to happen is somebody's going to get their car seized and sold, and there's going to be no recourse about it, all for the profitability of New York City and Vera Mobility, the for-profit company that operates these cameras. And I think it's a bad day for liberty when the government gets in league with for-profit companies and we are the product that they're selling, we the people.
I think we lost this battle when we accepted speed cameras to begin with and didn't fight against it and accepted the arguments that it was perfectly constitutional, whatever. So they're part of society now. I'd pay your speed cam tickets, though, folks.
Well, I'll tell you what, they're going to be an increasing part of our life, Tim, probably in the future, because this week, and I haven't reported on it yet because it's only in one side. It's only on, I think, the House side. Virginia, our home, also passed authorization for speed cameras, which we didn't have previously.
Oh, joy. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Scott, for that. I appreciate it. God, I was in such a good mood when this segment started, and now, well, I think I'm in the same mood as Joe Biden. The House has removed roadblocks to ratifying the Equal Rights Amendment. I thought I read this story back in 1978.
We talked about it recently when Virginia's legislature passed the Equal Rights Amendment. The problem is that when the amendment was passed previously in the federal Congress, pursuant to its movement from a proposal to an amendment, they included a time constraint that it had to pass through the state legislatures by X number of years. I think it was 10 years, but it doesn't matter. It's been a lot longer than 10 years, and we didn't make that deadline, meaning that it was passed well after that. Well, Jennifer Wexton, a congressperson from Virginia, basically presided over this vote where the federal Congress now said, oh, we're going to reverse that deadline. We didn't actually mean that, okay? So there's no deadline in place. The idea is that there's some kind of backdoor way to get this installed as an amendment without, Tim, what was supposed to happen with a constitutional amendment, which is that the people of the United States would agree through the Congress and through their state legislatures that an amendment was needed. Not through successive generations, but that one actual generation of adult voting Americans would do it. And so I think that this is important for us to pay attention to, because I think it could have sort of like this I think it's going to be a Supreme Court case, probably, if they continue to push through and try to get it added to the list of recognized amendments, even though it was passed in this haphazard and manner that went against the actual language of the passage at the time it went through the Congress.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Tim.
This program, Liberty Nation Radio and LibertyNation.com's own podcast, The Uprising, hosted by Scott and The Rabbit Hole. Politics and Prose with Mark Angelides, all available on demand at LibertyNation.com and from fine podcast providers everywhere. So that is it for this week, but we'll be back at you next week, same time, same station. Till then, this is Tim Donner saying, stand up for liberty. And we'll see you next time on Liberty Nation Radio.